July 28, 1944. The skies over southern England trembled as the familiar, haunting buzz of German V-1 flying bombs, nicknamed buzz bombs or doodlebugs by weary Londoners, filled the air. Royal Artillery Captain James Radford stood on the chalk cliffs of Dover, his binoculars trained on the horizon where the deadly weapons would soon appear. The early morning fog was just beginning to lift, revealing a deceptively peaceful English Channel. The men of the 174th Heavy Anti-Aircraft Regiment were confident their conventional anti-aircraft guns would perform as they always had, with frustrating inefficiency against the swift, unpredictable flying bombs. Little did the Germans know that in the coming hours, their terror weapon would meet its match in one of the war's most closely guarded technological secrets. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. This is the story of how an unassuming radio device the size of a coffee can would transform the battlefield, leaving German intelligence officers bewildered as their prized vengeance weapons fell from the sky in unprecedented numbers, and how the revelation of Allied technological superiority would force German engineers to confront the widening gap between Nazi propaganda and industrial reality. Captain Radford checked his watch again. 0542 hours. The morning briefing had indicated heavy V-1 launches were expected. Intelligence suggested the Germans were planning a concentrated attack to overwhelm their defenses. 3 months into the V-1 campaign, the flying bombs had already claimed thousands of British lives, and the psychological toll was mounting. Conventional anti-aircraft fire typically required nearly 2,500 shells to bring down a single V-1, an abysmal ratio that frustrated gunners and commanders alike. "The new equipment is in place, sir," reported Lieutenant Walsh, a young officer who had been with the unit since the Normandy landings. "All batteries report ready." Radford nodded. "Good. Remember, absolute secrecy. The men are to refer to the new fuses only as Device T in all communications. Any breach will result in court-martial." "Understood, sir. The men have been briefed." Radford had been among the select few officers granted clearance to know what the mysterious cylindrical devices actually were. VT fuses, a revolutionary proximity fuse that used radio waves to detect nearby objects and detonate at the optimal moment. The VT officially stood for variable time, a deliberate misnomer to hide their true function. Developed under absolute secrecy by American and British scientists, these fuses represented one of the war's most significant technological breakthroughs. Across the Channel in northern France, Oberstleutnant Werner Kruger of the Wehrmacht's 155th Flak Regiment watched as crews prepared another wave of V-1 flying bombs at a launch site concealed in the forest near Pas-de-Calais. The distinctive ramp pointed toward London, 150 miles away. As technical commander for the V-1 program in the sector, Kruger took pride in the weapon's psychological impact on the British population. "How many launches are scheduled for today, Hauptmann?" Kruger asked his adjutant. 120, Herr Oberstleutnant, replied Hauptmann Dieter Hoffmann, consulting his clipboard. "The largest concentration since June. The Führer himself has expressed interest in the results." "Excellent. The British defenses have improved somewhat, but their success rate remains acceptable. Our latest calculations show they're expending approximately 2,400 shells per intercept. They simply cannot sustain such waste." Hoffman nodded in agreement. "Intelligence reports their anti-aircraft batteries are suffering from ammunition shortages. This concentrated attack should overwhelm their defenses completely. Berlin will be pleased," Kruger said, allowing himself a small smile. "Perhaps this will finally break their resolve." What neither man knew was that across the Channel, a technological revolution was about to render their confidence tragically misplaced. At a research facility outside Washington, D.C., Dr. Eleanor Reynolds was already at work despite the early hour. As one of the few female physicists on the top-secret proximity fuse project, she had faced skepticism from male colleagues, but her expertise in radio wave propagation had proven invaluable. The Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory had become her home for the past 2 years as the team worked tirelessly to perfect the device. "Dr. Reynolds, you have a call from London," her assistant announced. It's General Williams. She picked up the secure line. General, good morning. Or I suppose it's afternoon for you. Dr. Reynolds. The voice crackled over the transatlantic line. Today's the day. The first large-scale deployment of your fuses against the V-1s is about to commence. Reynolds felt a surge of anticipation and anxiety. The production quality control issues we discussed, all addressed per your specifications, Williams assured her. The ruggedization modifications have been implemented. These aren't the same units that failed in the North Africa tests. How many are being deployed? 10,000 units. Every AA battery from Dover to London has been equipped. If they perform as expected, we'll have our answer within hours. Reynolds thought of the thousands of hours of research, the failed prototypes, the mathematical models that had to be recalculated countless times. The proximity fuse represented a quantum leap in weapons technology, a miniaturized radar set, complete with vacuum tubes and a battery that could withstand the 20,000 G-force of being fired from a gun. It had seemed impossible until they'd done it. Keep me informed, General, and good luck. Back in Dover, the first air raid sirens began their mournful wail at 0613 hours. Captain Radford watched as radar operators tracked the incoming wave of V-1s, nearly 30 in the first assault, with more behind them. All batteries, prepare to engage, he ordered through the radio. Use the new fuses exclusively. I repeat, use the new fuses exclusively. The men of the 174th had been drilling with the new ammunition for only 3 days. The fuses looked unassuming, small metal cylinders attached to the nose of conventional shells, but they had been told these would dramatically improve their effectiveness. Sergeant William Cooper, a veteran gunner who had been fighting since El Alamein, was skeptical. Some new gadget from the Boffins, he had told his crew the day before. Probably work about as well as the last miracle weapon they gave us. Now, as the first V-1s came into range, Cooper's 3.7-inch anti-aircraft gun was ready. The familiar pulse-jet roar of the flying bombs grew louder. Cooper had developed a personal hatred for the weapons. His sister's home in Croydon had been destroyed by one just weeks earlier. Target acquired, called his spotter. Range 8,000 yards, altitude 3,000 feet. Fire, Cooper ordered. The gun belched flame and smoke. The shell arced toward the incoming V-1, one of dozens now streaking across the sky. What happened next astonished Cooper and every other gunner along the coast. As the shell approached the V-1, still yards away from what would have been a clean miss with conventional fuses, it detonated, creating a lethal sphere of shrapnel that tore into the flying bomb's thin skin. The V-1 shuddered, its guidance system damaged, and then erupted in a spectacular fireball. Direct hit, shouted the spotter in disbelief. One shell, one kill. All along the defensive line, the scene repeated. V-1s that would have slipped through the barrage were caught in the deadly new web of proximity-triggered detonations. Unlike conventional time fuses that required precise calculation and perfect timing, the VT fuses needed only to get close. By 0700 hours, the results were becoming clear. Of the first wave of 30 V-1s, 25 had been destroyed before crossing the coastline. The remaining 5 were engaged by inland batteries with similar success. The mathematical impossibility of what they were witnessing wasn't lost on Captain Radford. Their efficiency had increased by nearly 2,000%. Send word to command, he ordered Lieutenant Walsh. Initial deployment exceeding all expectations. Request permission to continue using Device T against all incoming targets. At Bletchley Park, the nerve center of British intelligence operations, analysts were already processing the first reports. Wing Commander Ian Fleming, who would later gain fame as the creator of James Bond, was among those assigned to assess the effectiveness of the new weapon. These numbers can't be correct, stated his colleague, reviewing the initial tallies. It suggests an 83% success rate on first engagement. Oh, they're correct, Fleming replied with satisfaction. Our American friends have given us quite the edge. The question now is how long before the Germans figure out what's happening. In a bunker beneath Berlin, that process was already beginning. General Major Walter Dornberger, one of the senior officers overseeing the V-weapons program, was receiving the first disturbing reports from the Channel coast. This makes no sense, he muttered, reviewing the figures. They claim 82% of our first wave was destroyed before reaching London. That's impossible with conventional anti-aircraft technology. Across from him, a young SS intelligence officer, Hauptsturmführer Klaus Schmidt, offered a theory. Could they have deployed fighter aircraft in unprecedented numbers? No, Dornberger replied. Our observers would have reported that. Besides, even their best pilots have difficulty intercepting the V-1s. Something else is happening. By midday, the pattern was unmistakable. Of the 120 V-1s launched that day, only 21 reached their targets, an unprecedented failure rate that sent shockwaves through the German high command. Back in Dover, Captain Radford's men were jubilant. Sergeant Cooper, the skeptic, had personally witnessed his gun crew destroy 7 V-1s with just 9 shells, a feat that would have required hundreds of rounds just days earlier. Whatever these new fuses are, Cooper told his crew during a brief lull, they're bloody miraculous. As dusk approached, Captain Radford received a call from London Command. Captain, congratulations on today's success. You are to maintain absolute secrecy about the nature of the new device. If questioned, attribute the improved results to better training and conventional equipment improvements. Understood, sir. The men are quite excited, but they've been reminded of security protocols. Good. Intelligence suggests the Germans are already scrambling to understand what happened today. We want to keep them guessing as long as possible. Indeed, across the channel, Oberstleutnant Kruger was facing difficult questions from his superiors. A secure telephone line connected him to Berlin, where an increasingly agitated Dornberger demanded explanations. I cannot explain it, Herr General, Kruger admitted. The British defenses performed at levels we considered theoretically impossible. Our calculations suggested they would need to fire approximately 2,400 shells to destroy a single V-1. Today, they appeared to require fewer than 10. That is a 240-fold improvement overnight, Dornberger responded incredulously. Such improvement does not happen without new technology. Find out what they're using. Kruger promised to investigate immediately. After hanging up, he summoned Hauptmann Hoffmann. Contact our intelligence assets in England. I want every scrap of information about recent changes to their air defenses. And send a team to examine the wreckage of the downed V-1s. Perhaps they will reveal something. At the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory, Dr. Reynolds received the preliminary data with cautious satisfaction. A 240-fold improvement in efficiency, she told her team. The fuses performed even better in the field than in our tests. Dr. James Phillips, who had led the miniaturization efforts, smiled broadly. 4 years of work, Eleanor. Worth every sleepless night. Don't celebrate too much yet, she cautioned. The Germans will adapt. They always do. We need to prepare for countermeasures. Phillips nodded. How long do you think before they figure it out? If we're lucky, weeks. If not, days. She studied the performance data again. The critical question is whether they have the industrial capacity to respond effectively even after they understand the technology. 3 days later, on the outskirts of Calais, a team of German engineers examined wreckage from several downed V-1s. Hauptsturmführer Schmidt supervised as they meticulously cataloged damage patterns. The fragmentation patterns are unusual, noted Dr. Otto Weber, a weapons specialist. The damage is consistent with detonations occurring in proximity to the V-1, not from direct hits. Proximity detonations? Schmidt questioned. You mean some kind of proximity fuse, Weber confirmed. The Americans have been rumored to be working on such technology. It appears those rumors were accurate. Schmidt immediately reported their findings to Oberstleutnant Kruger, who forwarded the information to Berlin with the highest priority designation. Within hours, Dornberger was presenting the theory to Albert Speer, the Reich Minister of Armaments and War Production. A proximity fuse, Speer repeated thoughtfully. Using what technology? Our scientists believe it must use radio waves, Dornberger explained. A miniaturized radar system in each shell that detects when it approaches the target and detonates automatically. Speer looked skeptical. That would require extraordinary miniaturization and ruggedness. The electronic components would need to withstand the shock of firing and still function. Precisely why we dismissed it as impractical 2 years ago when our own scientists proposed it, Dornberger admitted. It appears the Americans have solved the engineering challenges we could not. Speer's expression darkened. If this is true, it represents a significant technological advantage. Can we replicate it? Not quickly, Dornberger replied honestly. Our electronic industries are already stretched to capacity, and precision components are increasingly difficult to produce under constant bombardment. Conservative estimates suggest 18 months of development, assuming we can spare the resources from other critical programs. 18 months, Speer repeated. By then, he left the implications unspoken. By then, the war might well be lost. We must adapt the V-1 itself, Dornberger suggested. Perhaps modifications to make it less vulnerable to this new weapon. In London, Prime Minister Winston Churchill was receiving his own briefing on the spectacular success of the VT fuses. 82% in a single day, he mused, puffing on his cigar. Most impressive. General Sir Frederick Pyle, commander of Anti-Aircraft Command, nodded. The most dramatic improvement in anti-aircraft effectiveness in the history of warfare, Prime Minister. And the psychological effect on our gunners has been tremendous. They've gone from feeling helpless to feeling invincible. And the Germans? Churchill inquired. What do they make of this sudden reversal? Intelligence suggests they've identified the proximity fuse as the cause, but understanding the principle and replicating it are very different matters. Their electronic industries cannot match our production capacity, particularly under current bombing conditions. Churchill smiled grimly. So they know what hit them, but can't hit back in kind. Excellent. Please convey my congratulations to the American team. This joint development may well prove as significant as the atomic project in the long run. 10 days after the initial deployment, Dr. Reynolds was invited to London to witness the VT fuses in action herself. Accompanied by military security, she visited a battery position south of London just as another V-1 attack was underway. The transformation from her laboratory theories to battlefield reality was striking. Each successful interception, and there were many, represented thousands of hours of research, testing, and production engineering. The miniaturized vacuum tubes that many had declared impossible to rugged eyes were functioning perfectly after being subjected to forces that would crush most mechanical devices. Captain Radford, now something of a celebrity within Anti-Aircraft Command, guided her tour. Your invention has transformed our effectiveness, Doctor. The men don't know exactly how it works, security protocols, but they've taken to calling them magic bullets. Reynolds watched as another V-1 erupted into flames. Not magic, Captain. Just good science and engineering, multiplied by American industrial capacity. The mass production element was indeed crucial. By August 1944, American factories were producing over 1 million VT fuses per month, an industrial feat that German manufacturing, under constant bombing and with dwindling resources, couldn't hope to match. At a Luftwaffe test facility near Munich, Oberstleutnant Kruger observed as engineers tested modifications to the V-1 design intended to counter the new Allied weapon. We've replaced the metal skin components with wooden ones where structurally feasible, explained Dr. Weber. This should reduce the radar reflection and make the proximity fuses less effective. And these? Kruger pointed to strange metal foil strips being loaded into a compartment. Radar countermeasures, Weber replied. When released, they create false returns that may confuse the proximity sensors, similar to what our night bombers use against British radar. Hauptmann Hoffman looked unconvinced. Will these modifications be enough? Theoretically, they should help, Weber hedged. But there's a more fundamental problem. The Americans aren't just deploying superior technology, they're deploying it at a scale we cannot match. Intelligence estimates they're producing nearly 40,000 of these fuses daily. The number hung in the air. German production of the entire V-1 weapon would never approach even a fraction of that figure. Kruger's expression hardened. When can the modified V-1s be ready for deployment? 2 weeks for initial units, Weber replied. Full production conversion will take longer. See that it happens faster, Kruger ordered. Berlin is demanding results. Yet even as the Germans scrambled to adapt, Allied countermeasures were evolving too. By mid-August, VT fuses were being deployed not just in anti-aircraft guns, but in shipboard weapons and field artillery. The technological gap was widening, not narrowing. In Washington, D.C., Dr. Reynolds presented the latest field performance data to a group of military officials and industrial leaders. The Germans have begun deploying V-1s with wooden components and radar countermeasures, she explained. As anticipated, our latest fuse modifications are already neutralizing these adaptations. Major General Osborne, who oversaw the Army's portion of the VT fuse program, nodded approvingly. The beauty of our position is that we're fighting a manufacturing battle now, not just a technological one. Even if they could match the design, which intelligence says they cannot, they lack the industrial base to compete. Reynolds agreed. The latest production figures show we've reached 1.2 million units per month. The Crosley Corporation alone is producing more VT fuses than Germany's entire electronics industry combined. The statistics told a story beyond the immediate tactical advantage. American factories had produced 22 million VT fuses by war's end, a scale of production that astonished captured German scientists during post-war debriefings. Back in southern England, Sergeant Cooper had witnessed the evolution of the air defense battle firsthand. By September, his battery was routinely destroying 9 out of 10 V-1s that entered their engagement zone. The proximity fuse had transformed their effectiveness so dramatically that gunners now viewed a miss as an anomaly rather than an expectation. "Remember when we'd fire hundreds of rounds to bring down a single doodlebug?" Cooper asked his crew during a maintenance break. "Now we complain if we need more than 2 shells. The Germans must be going mad trying to figure it out," replied Corporal Davies, his loader. "Imagine sending your wonder weapon across the channel and watching 90% of them explode before reaching the target." Cooper nodded. "They're still dangerous. The ones that get through still kill. But we've broken the back of their campaign." Indeed, by September 1944, the combined effect of proximity fuses and the Allied advance across France, which captured or threatened many launch sites, had effectively ended the V-1 threat to London. The Germans redirected their remaining V-1 stockpiles toward targets in Belgium and Holland, but with Allied forces equipped with the same defensive technology, the results were similar. In Berlin, the implications extended far beyond the V-1 program. At a high-level meeting that included Speer, Dornberger, and representatives from the German electronics industry, the proximity fuse was presented as evidence of a widening technological gap. "It's not merely that they've developed this device," Speer explained to a grim-faced audience. "It's what it represents. The Americans have successfully miniaturized and ruggedized electronic components to a degree our industry cannot match, and they're manufacturing them at a rate we cannot approach, even in theory." Dr. Heinrich Lang, a leading electronics expert, reluctantly confirmed the assessment. "Their industrial base is untouched by bombing. Their electronic component standardization is years ahead of ours, and their production techniques are more advanced. This single device, this fuse, demonstrates a systemic advantage we cannot overcome under current conditions." For Dornberger and others involved in Germany's various wonder weapon programs, the revelation was particularly disturbing. The narrative of German technological superiority, central to Nazi propaganda, was being systematically disproven on the battlefield. In November 1944, Oberstleutnant Kruger was transferred from the V-1 program to an anti-aircraft unit near Hamburg. The irony wasn't lost on him. From launching weapons against which the enemy had no defense, he was now operating defenses that were increasingly ineffective against Allied bombing raids. During a briefing with his new command staff, a young lieutenant asked the question many were thinking. "Herr Oberstleutnant, is it true what they say about the English having some kind of new miracle weapon that brought down the V-1s?" Kruger considered his response carefully. "Not a miracle, Lieutenant. Science and industry. The Americans developed a proximity fuse, a miniaturized radar in each artillery shell, and manufactured them by the millions. Our scientists understood the concept, but couldn't build them in sufficient quantities." "Couldn't we have copied their design?" another officer asked. "From captured examples?" "We recovered several," Kruger acknowledged. "But understanding the principle didn't solve the manufacturing challenge. They were producing more in one day than we could build in a year, and their supply chains weren't being bombed day and night. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The proximity fuse represented something beyond a tactical setback. It symbolized a strategic reality that no amount of German ingenuity or determination could overcome. Back in England, Captain Radford's unit was preparing for redeployment. With the V-1 threat effectively neutralized, many anti-aircraft units were being sent to support the Allied advance into Germany. During a final inspection, he found Sergeant Cooper cleaning his gun one last time. "She served us well," Cooper said, patting the gun's barrel. "Especially after we got those magic fuses." "Not magic, Sergeant. Science and mass production." Radford hesitated, then decided the war was advanced enough to bend the secrecy rules slightly. "They're called proximity fuses. Miniature radars that detect when they're near the target and detonate automatically." Cooper whistled. "In each shell? That's bloody clever. The Americans built them. Over 1 million per month." "1 million?" Cooper looked incredulous. No wonder the Germans couldn't keep up. As the war in Europe approached its final months, the proximity fuse found even wider application. In December 1944, during the Battle of the Bulge, VT-fused artillery shells were authorized for use against ground troops for the first time. The results were devastating to German forces caught in open terrain. In the Pacific theater, proximity fuses transformed naval warfare, dramatically increasing the effectiveness of anti-aircraft fire against Japanese kamikaze attacks. Ships equipped with VT-fused weapons routinely shot down 70 to 80% of attacking aircraft, compared to 10 to 15% with conventional fuses. Dr. Reynolds continued refining the technology throughout the war, eventually developing variations for different weapons systems and targets. In March 1945, she visited Germany with a scientific assessment team examining captured V-1 and V-2 facilities. At an underground factory near Nordhausen, she examined modified V-1 components designed to counter her invention. The wooden skin sections, radar-absorbing materials, and countermeasure dispensers represented the Germans' desperate attempts to overcome the proximity fuse advantage. "They understood the principle," noted Colonel James Williams, the team leader. "Their engineers were certainly capable, but their industrial base simply couldn't deliver." "It's sobering," Reynolds replied. "All the brilliant engineering in the world means nothing without the manufacturing capacity to realize it at scale." The numbers told the story more eloquently than words. By 1945, American industry had produced over 22 million proximity fuses. The entire German V-weapons program, by contrast, produced approximately 30,000 V-1s and 6,000 V-2 rockets. After Germany's surrender, Hauptsturmführer Schmidt was among the intelligence officers interrogated about the V-weapons program. His American counterparts were particularly interested in the German response to the proximity fuse. "We knew what it was," Schmidt explained. "We recovered intact examples and understood the technology. What astonished us was the scale. Our intelligence indicated you were producing over 1 million per month. Our entire electronics industry couldn't match that even if all other military production ceased." And psychologically, his interrogator pressed. What was the impact of this realization? Schmidt considered the question. It was the moment many of us realized the war was truly lost. Not because of any single battle, but because we were facing an industrial power that could develop advanced technology and then produce it in quantities we couldn't comprehend. Your proximity fuse wasn't just a better weapon. It was proof of a system we couldn't defeat. In the decades that followed, military historians would rank the VT fuse alongside radar, the atomic bomb, and penicillin as one of the key technological developments that shaped the outcome of World War II. Yet unlike those other advances, its story remained relatively unknown to the public due to extended post-war classification. For those who witnessed its impact firsthand, however, the lesson was clear. Sergeant Cooper, who returned to his pre-war job as a schoolteacher in Yorkshire, often told his students that the war wasn't won by a single dramatic invention, but by the American ability to take a brilliant idea and multiply it 1 million times. Captain Radford, who went on to a distinguished academic career studying military technology, published several influential papers on what he termed the industrialization of warfare. The proximity fuse, he argued, represented the perfect marriage of scientific innovation and mass production capacity, a combination that proved decisive. Dr. Reynolds continued her scientific career after the war, though much of her work remained classified for decades. In a rare 1965 interview, she reflected on the project that had consumed 4 years of her life. The proximity fuse wasn't just a weapon, she explained. It was a demonstration of what American industry could accomplish when focused on a single objective. The Germans couldn't believe we were producing 1 million electronic devices per month with reliability rates over 98% until they saw the evidence falling from the sky. The day when proximity fuses destroyed 82% of the V-1 attacks, July 28, 1944, marked a turning point beyond its immediate tactical impact. It demonstrated that the outcome of the war was no longer in doubt, not because of battlefield victories alone, but because one side had achieved a level of industrial and technological integration that the other could not match. For Oberstleutnant Kruger, who survived the war and eventually became an engineering professor in post-war Germany, the lesson was one he impressed upon generations of students. In modern warfare, brilliant individual engineering is necessary but insufficient. Without the industrial capacity to scale production, even the most innovative technology remains merely theoretical. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II, and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.